Let me ask you something. Do you know someone who works incredibly hard and is still broke? Maybe it's a coworker, a neighbor. Maybe it's you. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Hard work was never the missing ingredient. This is the story of a man named Marcus. He worked harder than almost anyone in his town, and for years he couldn't understand why it never seemed to matter. By the end of this story, you might understand exactly why. Before we continue, if stories like this speak to you, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. We share real stories about money, discipline, and the choices that quietly shape our future. Stay until the end because this one might explain something about your own life.
Marcus was 34 years old, a construction worker who was on his feet from sunrise until the light gave out. He never called in sick, never showed up late, never cut a corner. His hands were rough, his shoulders ached constantly, and by Friday he could barely lift his arms above his head. He was, without question, one of the hardest workers on any site he touched, and yet, somehow, he was always broke. He used to tell the younger guys on the crew, "Work hard and the money follows." He believed it completely. He just never noticed that for him, it never actually did.
Marcus rented a small house on the edge of town. The pipes rattled every winter and the paint peeled near the porch. Every payday, the same routine played out. He'd cash his check and immediately feel like a different man, rich even, just for a moment. New tools he didn't need for jobs he wasn't working, dinners out with the crew, a few rounds because we earned it. By the following week, it was gone completely. He'd shrug and say, "Guess I'll work harder next week." And he did, every single week. More hours, more effort, same empty account. Paycheck, spending, empty, more hours. It never occurred to him that the problem might not be the hours at all. One Friday, Marcus's truck broke down right in the middle of a job site. He needed $400 for the repair, and he didn't have it. Not because he hadn't earned it. He'd earned plenty that month. It just wasn't there anymore. He borrowed the money from his foreman, red-faced and embarrassed, a man who worked harder than anyone, asking for a loan he couldn't repay for weeks. That night, lying in bed, he did something he'd never done before. He actually added up his overtime hours for the year. 312 hours extra on top of a full-time job. Then he thought about his bank account. Almost nothing. 312 hours and nothing to show for it. The math didn't make sense, and that scared him more than the broken truck ever could.
The next week, an older man joined the crew. Quiet, steady, never rushed, never complained. At lunch, Marcus noticed something odd. The old man packed the same simple lunch every day and drove a truck that was 15 years old but ran perfectly. Marcus asked him, half joking, "You don't believe in treating yourself?" The old man smiled without looking up from his sandwich. "I don't treat myself with money I haven't decided to spend yet. That's not treating yourself. That's just spending blind." Marcus laughed it off at first, but the word stuck with him all afternoon, all week. Spending blind. That was exactly what he'd been doing, every payday, for 15 years. He'd always believed the problem was his income, not enough hours, not enough pay. But sitting there, hammer in hand, a different thought crept in, quiet and uncomfortable. What if it was never about how much I made? What if it was about never once deciding where it went? He didn't sleep well that night either. If you're watching this and you work hard, genuinely hard, but still feel stuck, ask yourself honestly, is it really your paycheck holding you back, or is it what happens to it the moment it lands? The next morning, Marcus didn't rush to the job site early like he usually did. Instead, he sat in his truck for 10 minutes, just thinking. Then he pulled out his phone and did something he'd never bothered to do. He looked at his last 3 months of spending. It wasn't pretty. tools he never used, takeout 4 or 5 times a week, a gym membership he hadn't touched in months. None of it felt reckless in the moment. That was the problem. Nothing felt reckless in the moment. It only looked reckless all added up.
That week, he tried something small. Before every purchase, he asked himself one question. Did I decide this, or did I just feel like it? It sounded simple. It wasn't. At lunch, the old man noticed the change. "You've gone quiet," he said. Marcus shrugged. "Just thinking about where my money's actually been going." The old man nodded slowly. That's the hardest work most people never do. That night, Marcus canceled the gym membership, packed his lunch for the first time in years, and set aside $20, just 20, into a separate account he swore not to touch. It felt almost silly, $20 after everything he'd worked for, but it was his, and it stayed.
It wasn't easy. One Friday, the crew invited him out to celebrate finishing a big job. Drinks, a nice dinner, the kind of night he never used to think twice about. He almost went, card already in his pocket. Then he thought about the truck breaking down, the borrowed money, the red-faced embarrassment. He stayed home instead, cooked eggs and rice, and watched TV alone. It wasn't glamorous, but for the first time, staying home felt like winning, not missing out. Weeks turned into months. The habit got quieter, steadier. Marcus wasn't working any harder than before. If anything, he was working the same. He was just no longer letting the money disappear the second it arrived. And slowly, that alone started to change everything.
A year passed, then another. For the first time since he started working, Marcus reached the end of a month with money still sitting in his account. He stared at the number for a long moment. It wasn't huge, but it was real, and it was his. He kept going. He started reading on his lunch breaks, the same lunch breaks he used to spend scrolling his phone. He learned about saving, about interest, about letting small amounts grow quietly over time. His account grew slowly, a few $100s, then a few thousand, then enough 2 years later for a small down payment on a used pickup, paid mostly in cash. He never rushed, never borrowed to look successful. He built it the same way he built everything else, one decision at a time.
One afternoon, his truck broke down again. Same kind of repair, same $400. This time, he didn't need to borrow a single cent. He paid it, drove home, and didn't think about it again. That's when it hit him. Quietly, without any fanfare. This was what had changed. Not the hours, not the hard work, just this. The old man retired that spring. On his last day, Marcus shook his hand. "That sandwich comment," Marcus said, "changed my whole life." The old man smiled. "I didn't say much. You just finally decided to listen." Today, Marcus is still on job sites, still working hard, because hard work was never the problem. But now people on the crew ask him questions about saving, about patience, about that separate account he still adds to every single payday without fail. He tells them the same thing every time. Working hard fills your hands. Deciding where it goes fills your future.
Here's what Marcus learned the hard way. Broke people don't stay broke because they don't work hard enough. Most of them work harder than anyone. They stay broke because no one ever taught them the second half of the equation, deciding on purpose where every dollar goes. So here's the question for you. Are you working hard but spending blind? Tell us in the comments, what's one thing you've been spending on without ever really deciding to? If this story meant something to you, like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it right now. Hard work fills your hands. A decision fills your future. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next story.